Couple of dueling bantamweights looking to lock horns coming up this weekend, and a couple of guys with some real meta nicknames. We have the Last Samourai, Smolka, taking on Vandetta, Vince Morales. And I have to say this, lay my cards on the table. I've been wrong about both of these guys before, and for Smolka, we have a little bit of a saying here at Fight Night Picks, or I should say, that's where the record scratch comes in. We used to have a saying about Smolka. Matt, let's throw it on over to a clip.
Go for the takedown. I'm going to do a front flip and then try to get on your back. And then worst case, I'll go for a triangle. Smolka's very happy to be on his back during the fight. And I think Casey Kenny's going to be able to exploit that.
Always used to say the Smolka effect. And it was in so many videos. There were so many examples because, Matt, you talked about it in that clip, but he used to get so happy to be on the bottom, to work his jiu-jitsu where you're going to get caught. And you said it before the Casey Kenny fight. He's going to get caught in one of these positions. And what happens, you get caught in a one-arm guillotine, you get submitted. So then in his next fight, we're all flying high and mighty. He's fighting Jose Alberto Quinones, a guy who was a bit of a jobber in the UFC. He could box, he could throw hands, he could wrestle a little bit, but at the end of the day, struggled against some of the better fighters. First exchange in that fight, this is where we were wrong. Quinones runs in, gets the takedown. Smolka goes full Angus Young on the stage, but on the side of the cage, and he's on the bottom, uses his feet to push off the cage and gets back up to his feet, and the Smolka effect is no more. Second round, another takedown from Quinones. Smolka gets right back up. He ends up throwing great leather, very good hands, nice 1-2 down the pipe. Big time win for Smolka too. And the craziest thing about this guy, made his UFC debut in 2014, main evented very shortly thereafter against Paddy Holohan, ended up going on a skid against some of the better fighters in the promotion. He was a giant favorite when he fought Brandon Morono years ago. So he takes his talents outside of the UFC. He wins 4 fights impressively on the regional scene, comes back in, and since he's been back with the UFC, all 5 fights have ended in finish. Now, he's 3-2 in those, but regardless, he has been finished by Matt Schnell, submission, and Casey Kenny. But Matt, Smolka, the most exciting guy at bantamweight?
He has that kill or be killed mindset. And he is one of those fighters where no matter what his record is, you're probably going to like him more than you should, you know? Because that is his style. He's like Jimmy Manuwa. You're going to win by stoppage or you're going to lose by stoppage. But it's not going to be boring. And that's what MMA fans care about at the end of the day. The weird thing about Smolka is that he has really good skills when you think about all of his, A-quality skills. They just don't really complement each other all that well. He has good wrestling, but he doesn't have great wrestling. And his 2 best positions are, he's a really good puncher in tight, even though he's got long, wiry arms. See, there's some contrast there. And he's a great fighter when he's got that top position. He is sort of that leather blanket type of a fighter. Lead blanket, not leather blanket. He's got that lead blanket type of a style. But it is very odd because he can get held down. It's almost like he's so heavy on the mat that he does have a hard time getting back up. Now, it will be interesting when we do see him start to fight those upper echelon grapplers again, because someone like Casey Kenny, who can use his defensive wrestling to almost force you to become a sloppy striker yourself, and then he can go for his own takedowns, that's one thing. Out-grappling Jose Quinones isn't that big of a deal. He's remember Paul London in the WWE?
Yeah.
Weird reference, but he's kind of like him. He was around, he'd do cool stuff, but at the end, you knew he was probably going to lose in that 3 count. Weird reference. It's going to be really interesting in this fight with Vince Morales because I was in the same boat as you. I did not have a very high opinion of him going into that Draco Rodriguez fight, and I really thought Rodriguez was going to be able to out-wrestle him, outstrike him, just kind of out-MMA him, because nothing Morales did, in my mind, was going to be able to go out there and overpower Draco Rodriguez. That fight wasn't even close.
No, and that's the craziest part about it. For Vince Morales, he's a guy out of the Pacific Northwest. His cousin's Ricky Simone, who cornered him in his last fight. But so did John Wood, and that's the other thing. Vince Morales moved full-time for his last camp down to Syndicate, so he's been full-time in Vegas, still there getting ready for this fight as well. You talk about a litany of training partners there. They are aplenty, but for me, I look at it, Frank Hickman in some of the pictures, which was a little bit of a surprise. Cameron Else, there's all sorts of great guys there. Else maybe notwithstanding, but when I look at Vince Morales, he's a guy that can do a lot of things very well. It's just maybe piecing them together has been an issue. And when you're fighting fighters like a Chris Gutierrez, sometimes you're going to lose by TKO to leg kicks. Andre Ewell's a pretty good fighter. Did he lose by TKO due to leg kicks?
Pretty much.
Well, yeah, the leg kicks made a giant difference. So for Morales in that fight against Rodriguez, he did very, very well. Now, for Morales, I look at him as a guy that can really push the action. And with Smolka, my one issue is, now he had a wild first round against Quinones. Second round, he ends up getting the finish. Quinones' cardio dropped off a cliff at the end of the first round. Smolka's not a giant volume guy. He's also a guy that leads heavy on his lead leg. Like, you watch a Nate Diaz fight where he boxes, but he keeps a lot of pressure on his front leg. Smolka will fight in that type of a stance, and he can really get chopped down. So I'd be looking to Morales in some of those exchanges for his leg kicks. But I look at this fight, Team Oyama for Smolka. He's been there forever. Morales out of syndicate. Now you're coming into this fight where, again, Smolka was actually booked in a giant fight this past summer, fell out due to staph infection. That was supposed to be against Sean O'Malley. Now he draws Vince Morales here. So again, these guys, very well matched. The one other thing I want to say about Smolka, weighed 134.5 for his last fight against Quinones. But that was the rebooking of the fight because he weighed in at 139 before that for a fight against Quinones. And unfortunately, there were a lot of complications due to the weight cut. I still worry about that for him in this one because this is a guy that had trouble at 125 as well.
And that's the thing. When you have problems at 125, that's one thing. When you move up in weight, we all kind of expect those problems to just be alleviated. Like, no, okay, Johnny Hendricks, not a great example. John Lineker, okay, another bad example. But for the most part, when guys move up in weight, they no longer miss weight. So I do share those same concerns. But what I will say about Smolka is that he's at the lower end of MMA fighters where he does have a very easily distinguishable skill set. Like, he's not just a wrestle boxer. He's not just a jiu-jitsu player. Like, he does have a unique skill set, and that's the one thing that I always have a hard time picking against when we're talking about unranked fighters where there are some unknowns about them. Because with Vince Morales, I like your point about how Smolka doesn't fight with a very high output, but the counter to that is he does move forward a lot. So if he can at least get into some clinch exchanges to where he might not be the one throwing a lot of punches, but at least he's putting out some of the fire of Morales, I do think he might be able to even some of those striking totals as the fight goes on if it does go late. And for Smolka, if he gets that top position one time in this fight, I really do think he can do enough damage to at least change the momentum of this fight. Now, does that mean he's going to get mount, drop elbows, take the back, and get the finish immediately? No, not by any means. But Smolka has one of those games where he's got really deceiving ground and pound, and that's the thing about him. He is tall and thin, but he's got decent power in his shots. So if he gets that one spot, I think the fight could be over. Whereas for Morales, he's just going to have to be really consistent throughout 15 minutes. And that's hard to do against a guy like Smolka, who's been in there with some of the best guys in the division. And the last thing I'll say about Smolka is that he kind of reminds me of Jamie Mullarkey. Like, Jamie Mullarkey's lost to some really good fighters, and then he goes and trains with them. Like, he's trained with Volkanovski, he's trained with Brad Riddell after he's lost to them. Louis Smolka has trained with Brandon Moreno after they fought. Like, they were like, hey, just because we fought doesn't mean we have to hate each other. We can learn from each other. So the thing I like about Smolka is that when he does lose, he doesn't normally come back and it's the exact same fighter. He will add something to his game.
It's really interesting, too, because for Morales, you can look at some of his wins. I mean, the Amin Zahabi fight, I thought Zahabi won that fight, but it was very close. And then his fight against Benito Lopez, that one could have gone either way. It was a very, very close fight. Not all fights that end by unanimous decision are blow-away victories. I mean, some of them can be very close. He beats Draco Rodriguez, loses the first round, comes back in a big way in rounds 2 and round 3. He's a guy that even if you look at his losses, it's the 2-1-2. It's like the Azalea Banks song. He's got 2 by decision, 1 by knockout, 2 by submission. And again, as I said, for Smolka, it's either kill or be killed, or so it has been in the recent string of wins. We look at the odds for this one. Smolka opened the favorite at a minus 185. He's now roughly a minus 141 over on Best Fight Odds. For Vince Morales, opened at a plus 160, he's a plus 115 or thereabouts. We look at the Tapology votes. I expect them to be far and away for your favorite. I'm going to set it, Matt, over under 75% Smolka. What are you thinking?
I was thinking 70, so I'll say slightly under. Wow,
I'm wrong. 1,210 total votes, 87% Smolka, 70% by decision. You got 13% by submission, 9% by knockout. For the 13% that have Morales, 66% have him to win by decision. Matt, I feel like you tipped your hand a little bit, but who are you picking in this fight?
When you've got one guy who either wins by finish or loses by finish, fighting a guy who doesn't often win by finish, it does make my decision a little bit easier. Because if this fight is ended before the 15 minutes are over, it's because Louis Smolka's probably won the fight. I doubt Morales has the ability to go out there and submit him, and I don't think he has the power to TKO him on the feet either, because I do think Smolka, if things get bad, he's almost got that Damian Maia effect, where if you drop him, and if you're not 100% sure he's hurt, you're not just going to jump in and try to finish him afterwards. You are going to be somewhat hesitant to just go for the finish, so I actually do like Smolka in this fight.
It is a really, really tricky one. Again, for Morales, you got to try and implement some of those kicks. You got to try and bring in a little bit of your volume. For Smolka, he has been out for almost a full year. For Morales, his last time out only 3 months ago. I absolutely love the camp change out of Morales, and I think if he's able to bring in some of that top pressure with his wrestling, which is way easier said than done against a very slick jiu-jitsu player in Smolka. But I do like Morales in this fight. So I've got Morales. I think he's going to get it done by decision. You've got Louis Smolka to continue his reign of terror and try and make it 2 in a row for Team Oyama's own. We're split on the pick. I've got Morales. You've got Smolka. Big time fight coming up this weekend. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.